One September night in 1241, 70 armed men surround a farmhouse in Iceland. Inside is the richest man in the country, a poet, a politician, twice the speaker of its parliament, and right now he is hiding in his own cellar in his nightclothes. The men find him. He says three words: "Do not strike." They strike. And here's the part nobody tells you. The man murdered in that basement had just finished writing down every Norse god you have ever heard of: Odin, Thor, Loki, Valhalla. Almost everything we know about them survives because of him. And the way he got away with writing pagan gods in a Christian century under a Christian king was one strange legal trick. He swore, in ink, that Odin was never a god at all. Odin, he wrote, was a man, a refugee from Troy. Yes, that Troy. This is the story of Snorri Sturluson and of the lie that saved a mythology. To understand why anyone would invent that, you need to meet the author, because Snorri was not a monk in a cold room. Iceland in the 1200s has no king. It's a republic run entirely by feuding chieftains with law degrees and swords, and Snorri is its final boss. He inherits nothing, marries money, and by his 40s he is the most powerful man on the island, twice elected law speaker, the closest thing Iceland has to a president, with estates, private armies of relatives, and a geothermal hot tub, which still exists, where he holds his meetings like a Bond villain with cold feet. And he plays one very dangerous away game. The young king of Norway, Håkon, wants Iceland. Snorri becomes the king's man, promises to deliver the island, then goes home and mostly delivers speeches. Remember that. It has a bill attached. But here is what Snorri actually loves: the old poetry. Skaldic verse, the impossible, riddling court poetry of the North, is dying, because every line of it runs on the old gods. You cannot call poetry Odin's mead or gold Sif's hair if nobody remembers who Odin and Sif are. The church has spent 2 centuries deleting them, so Snorri sits down in Reykholt and writes a poetry manual, the Edda, and smuggles an entire pagan religion inside it, the way you'd smuggle a cathedral inside a grammar book. One problem: a Christian chieftain under a Christian king cannot open with, "Here are the gods, they're great." The church has exactly one official position on pagan gods: they are demons. And writing demon fan fiction is a career with a short ceiling. Snorri needs a loophole. And he finds one. A loophole with a 1,000-year pedigree. Page 1 of the Edda, and Snorri opens not in Asgard, but on a map. Near the center of the earth, he writes, stood the most glorious city ever built, Troy. 12 kingdoms, one high king. And one of its princes, the grandson of King Priam himself, through Priam's own daughter, is a boy the Trojans call Tror, whom we, says Snorri, call Thor. Yes, in this version, Thor is Trojan royalty. He's fostered in Thrace, kills his foster father at 12, takes over the province, and wanders the world beating giants, berserks, and one very large dragon. 17 generations down his line comes a chieftain with second sight named Vodin, whom we call Odin. And Odin looks north the way a man checks a weather forecast and sees that his name will be worshipped there. So he packs up the entire aristocracy of Troy and walks through Germany, where he installs his sons as kings, and every royal family conveniently descends from them. One son gets Denmark, another line gets Sweden, another Norway. The locals take one look at these tall, organized, suspiciously well-dressed Southerners and start worshiping them. The Aesir, Snorri explains, simply means men of Asia. It doesn't, but it's tidy, and tidy wins. In his other book, The History of the Kings, Snorri runs the same story with map coordinates. Asgard was a real city east of the River Don near the Black Sea. The war between the Aesir and the Vanir, the Great War of the Gods, was a border dispute between 2 neighboring tribes, settled with a hostage exchange. And my favorite detail in the whole saga, the man Odin, dying of old age in his bed in Sweden, has himself scratched with a spear point at the very last moment, because the god of war takes everyone who dies by a blade, and even the founder has to qualify on a technicality. The Allfather enters his own heaven on a paper cut. Then they burn him, the Swedes decide he has simply gone home, and the worship begins. Now, if our kings descend from Troy sounds like a weirdly specific flex, it was the most fashionable claim in Europe. Rome did it first. Caesar's family claimed Aeneas, Prince of Troy. So the Franks invented a founder named Francio, Prince of Troy. Britain invented Brutus, great-grandson of a Trojan hero, landing on the White Cliffs. By the Middle Ages, Trojan ancestry is the European club card, and Snorri is buying the North a membership. Your gods weren't demons, and your kings weren't nobodies. They were Trojan aristocracy with a forwarding address. And here's the part almost nobody mentions. The English made Odin human centuries before Snorri was born. Around 731, the monk Bede records that the first Saxon warlords in Britain, Hengist and Horsa, were great-great-grandsons of Woden, not the god, the ancestor. Nearly every Anglo-Saxon royal house runs its family tree through Woden, like a respectable dead grandfather. And in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the same lists keep climbing, name by name, past Woden, all the way up to Noah and Adam, a pagan storm and war god, filed by monks into the Book of Genesis, somewhere between real kings and the flood. Snorri didn't even invent his genealogy. Half the names in his Troy family tree are lifted straight from those English king lists. And over in Denmark, at almost the same moment, a historian named Saxo writes the same secret with a straight face. Odin was a man, wrongly worshipped as a god. 2 authors, 2 countries, 1 move. And if the trick feels familiar, it should. It is the exact tool the church sharpened on Zeus 1,000 years earlier. A god who was once a man is not a demon. He's just history. And history is allowed. So, was he? A man somewhere behind the smoke? A chieftain so impressive the North promoted him? Here is where the evidence walks in, and it does not come from Iceland. It comes from Rome, from a brooch, and from your own calendar. Start with Rome. In the year 98, the historian Tacitus describes the tribes of Germany and says their chief god is Mercury. The Romans translated foreign gods into their own. Which German god got translated as Mercury, the clever wanderer who guides the dead? We know because the translation fossilized in the days of the week. The Romans' Day of Mercury became, in every Germanic language, Woden's Day, Wednesday. You said his name this week. You'll say it again in a few days. That equation was already standard 11 centuries before Snorri picked up a pen. The god was fully installed while Rome still had emperors. Then the brooch, a small clasp from Nordendorf in Germany from around the year 600, with runes scratched on the back. And one of the words is Woden. His name on a piece of jewelry 6 full centuries before the Edda. Cities carry him too. Odense in Denmark is literally Odin's sanctuary. There is a town wearing his name right now, with an airport and a zoo. And then the name itself, which is the quiet killer. Odin comes from the old word Othar, fury, frenzy, poetic possession. Wodenaz, master of the frenzy. Around 1070, the churchman Adam of Bremen, describing the great heathen temple at Uppsala, defines him in 3 flat Latin words. Wodan id est furor. Woden, that is, rage. Kings are named Harold. Kings are named Olaf. Nobody looks into a crib and names the baby Rage. It is not a man's name. It is a job title, a force that wears faces. If there ever was a chieftain underneath, he took the job's name, not the other way around. And you'd think that settles it, except this story has a rule. The idea refuses to die. In 2001, the most famous explorer alive, Thor Heyerdahl, the Kon-Tiki man, a Norwegian literally named after the god, reads Snorri's map coordinates and takes them at face value. If Asgard was a real city east of the Don, then a real city can be excavated. So he goes. 86 years old, trowel in hand, digging at Azov by the Black Sea for Odin's earthly capital. Norway's historians and linguists come down on him like a hammer. Selective sources, backwards method, and etymology 1,000 years out of date. And he digs anyway, publishes anyway, and dies the next spring with the argument still open. The last Viking expedition in history was launched in the 21st century, and it sailed on one sentence by Snorri. Which brings us back to the cellar. September 1241. The bill arrives. The king Snorri kept promising Iceland to has run out of patience. The order comes from the crown, and the men with swords are led by Snorri's own former son-in-law. Politics killed him. But here is the twist this whole series has been walking toward. With Zeus, the man story was wrong about the god and right about the industry. With Odin, flip it. The man story is fiction, and it is the only reason the gods survived. No Troy alibi, no legal cover. No legal cover, no Edda. No Edda, and Odin, Thor, Loki, Ragnarok, most of it goes into the ground with the last pagan grandmother. Snorri's lie was not the attack on the mythology, it was the arc. He demoted the gods to men, and that demotion is why you know their names. The man in the cellar saved the gods by killing them first. Next time, we stay in the north, because there is one part of Norse mythology that is not a story at all. The myths say that before the end of the world, the sun will fail, and 3 winters will come with no summer between them. Here's the thing. In the year 536, the sun failed, for real. A veil covered it for 18 months. Tree rings remember the cold, ice cores remember the ash, and in Scandinavia, half the population didn't live to see the sky clear. They buried gold to buy the sun back. It didn't work. Ragnarok, it turns out, may not be a prophecy at all. It may be a memory. Every name and date from today is in the description. Go check my work. That is still the entire point of this channel. And keep the oldest rule of the story in mind, because this whole series runs on it. The answers to the end are in the beginning.